Yet our best trained, best educated, best equipped, best prepared troops refuse to fight. Matter of fact, it's safe to say that they would rather switch than fight.
Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype.
Yes! Was the start of my last jam, so here it is again, another death jam. But since I gave you all a little something that I knew you lacked, they still consider me.
Zambia, one of the most copper-rich nations in the world, produced $7.23 billion worth of copper in 2011, but only made $1.35 billion in revenue. That copper went on to be used in our cell phones, TVs, other electronics, construction materials, and we paid for that copper, but most of the money didn't go to Zambia. Most of the profits from Zambia's copper actually go to foreign multinational companies who own Zambia's mines. Glencore, the largest multinational mining company in Zambia, at one point had an annual revenue 10 times the size of Zambia's GDP. But it gets even worse. These corporations don't pay their taxes. In 2011, Glencore paid nothing in corporation taxes in Zambia. The amount of money that Zambia loses to corporate tax dodging each year is estimated to be around $3 billion. That's nearly twice the health and education budget of Zambia. This means a lot to me as a human being because I want everyone to be able to go to school, have access to high quality healthcare, clean water, good food. I don't think that's a utopian idea. I don't think it's utopian to suggest that little girls in Zambia shouldn't have to sell sex to older men in their communities to try to escape poverty. I don't think it's utopian to suggest that thousands of Zambians should not be dying of malaria every year. But the current global financial architecture is not conducive to the flourishing of all peoples. The current global power structure promises a body count, and I think that is a tragedy of our times. Okay? So that's why we're doing this challenge, as an antidote to feeling disconnected from the humans of our stuff. Feeling and acting more connected might change the way we vote. It might make us pick up our phone and call our congressperson, or the leaders of powerful corporations in an attempt to address suffering for the world's most vulnerable people. It can change the way we participate in our global structure. And if we change these things, we can change the world. So for my challenge, I'm taking a trip to Kabwe, Zambia, the first large mining operation in the country. It operated with little to no regulations, from when it started in 1904 to when it closed in 1994. And the result has poisoned countless people with lead, one of the most potent neurotoxins known to man. It's also been ranked by the Blacksmith Institute as one of the top 10 most polluted cities on the planet, with 250,000 people being potentially affected right now. I also know of an ex-copper miner who lives there, who agreed to tell us what it's like to mine the copper that goes in Dr. Rush's Amazon Alexa. All right, bus leaves in 30 minutes, so let's go.
Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype.
Fuck out, women, ain't your baby.
Cool, thanks.
Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype.
I think I've gotten to Joachim's house. He says he lives in a mansion around back.
Gary.
Hey, what's up, bro?
Yeah, I'm good, man. You're ready to come in, you're welcome. So what we're doing right now is we're on our way to pick up the guys to go together with to the Black Mountain.
So why are we taking these guys?
Why we're taking them is it can't just be the two of us. The place is like kind of far, and we need security. They're kind of muscular more than us, so they'll protect us while we're there.
That's good. When I was coming from the office, they were police transporting prisoners, and they're shooting their guns.
Yeah.
We don't do that in the United States.
We're under state of emergency.
Yeah, that was crazy. Cool.
Don't.
Here's what I want you all to do for me.
That did not go as planned. It turns out I needed those guys for security. Also, it's 3 a.m. and I'm talking to you in a bathroom. I got stranded in Kabwe for a couple days. The country is in a state of emergency. The market near me in Lusaka was attacked with petroleum bombs the day before I left. And my first morning in Kabwe, I woke up to gunshots. Basically, the president jailed his main political opponent on charges of treason, and if he's convicted, he'll be hung by the neck until dead on national television. At least that's what I've been told. This is making Zambians upset, and some people are lighting stuff on fire in protest. It's taken me a while to get things done. Anyway, I had this whole history of the mines prepared, and I was going to tell while walking around, and I was going to interview people, and it kind of just crashed and burned. I'll let this footage explain.
Actually,
So, tell the camera where we are.
Then you have the right to view the Black Mountain.
This makes the news for being one of the most polluted places in the whole world. I'm here in Kabwe, Zambia, at Black Mountain, one of the most toxic sites in the world. This site is one of the original mining sites of the British colonial government here. It started mining in 1904 and was the first major enterprise of Zambia. The safe level of lead in soil is like 400 parts per million, and this stuff has been measured to be 30,000 to 60,000 parts per million. Kids back there riding their bike. Do your parents work here?
yes, these people who are illegally mining, 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 illegally mining. They've been illegally mining. Yeah. So any person that comes to the camera here, you think they'll capture what they're doing and they'll expose them.
So this site was
This guy began to report it.
Joakim, hey Joakim! In a better place in the bathroom. It almost got violent between the illegal miners and us, but luckily the guys I was with calmed them down and we got out of there. But that's how the most desperately poor people survive in this area. They dig around in the slag for scraps and they take it right across the street to some big fancy semi-trucks, sell it to wealthy industrialists who are able to turn around and sell the scraps for a higher price. So do they know how toxic that is?
Actually, the people who are mining, these are not educated. They don't even know what the effect is. Yeah. Say they're like the low class.
And this work kills them. Lead is an element that looks a lot like calcium in the body. So the body stores it in its tissues. It's deposited in the bones, and over time, lead is released into the bloodstream, and the body stores it in soft tissues like the kidneys or the brain, with devastating effects on these organs. Experts from The Guardian were here in Kabwe just a couple months ago, and were able to interview some illegal miners. People have died in the dangerous hand-dug tunnels. People bring their children to work with them because they can't afford to send them to school, exposing them to deadly levels of lead over time. The lead from this site runs off into surrounding towns. It's in the water, the food, and in the brains of everyone, destroying cognitive development in children. Mental illness is sky high, and children struggle to learn in school. People are constantly sick. 5 micrograms per deciliter of blood is the threshold for public health intervention for lead poisoning in children. And levels as high as 120 micrograms per deciliter can kill somebody. But in Kabwe, there have been children that have been measured to have 300 micrograms of lead per deciliter of their blood. But why have countless people been poisoned here? How did this start? Well, by British colonialists robbing Africa of its resources to enrich their own country. And this city was where large mining operations began in Zambia in 1904. The British had a way of forcing people to work in the mines through something called hut taxes. These were taxes on the mud huts of local people. In order to pay the taxes, people had to join the formal labor market, so local people had no choice but to go work in the mines. This cheap, black, colonized labor made operation costs extremely low for the British. From its years of operation from 1904 to 1994, this mine was one of the most famous mines in the world. Zambia was the principal supplier of lead and zinc from southern Africa, and this mine was the principal source of that. In total, it's estimated that 2.1 million tons of zinc, 800,000 tons of lead, 80,000 kilograms of silver, and 235,000 kilograms of cadmium were taken from this one mine. Now, commodity prices are extremely volatile over time, and this isn't an accurate representation of the value of what was pulled out of this mine, but if you measure these amounts at today's prices, it would value over $6.2 billion. Just from this one mine in this one impoverished city. This systematic extraction has been happening for generations across Africa. The good news is that Zambia gained independence in 1964 and set to work using their natural resources to benefit themselves, developing their nation and caring for their people. And one might think that once and for all, they were free of international exploitation. The book explains that Zambia sold their mines to private companies to repay their debts. The documentary we'll watch does an excellent job of exposing the political and economic chicanery from the multinational corporations that bought those mines. But Zambia losing their mines wasn't just this unfortunate accident. It was planned by the most powerful people in the world. Zambia and other poor countries, once gaining their independence from colonial powers, needed money to finance their own development and began seeking loans from international private lenders. Wall Street investment banks happened to have extra cash at this time because the United States threatened military action against Arab OPEC states in 1973 and coerced them into circulating their excess petrodollars through Wall Street banks. Wall Street decided to spend this extra cash abroad in the form of high-interest loans to poor countries like Zambia. Eventually, the high and increasing interest rates triggered a debt crisis in the early 1980s, and these poor countries began defaulting their loans. Western investment banks pressured governments to step in and recover these funds, and so that's exactly what they did. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, institutions largely controlled by the United States and Britain, began instituting what were called structural adjustment programs to recover this money. Structural adjustment programs offered loans to heavily indebted countries on the condition that they implement economic reforms designed by the West. The IMF and the World Bank promoted radical demarket regulation, massive sales of public resources to private corporations, decreased expenditures for things like healthcare, and liberalization of trade with the assumption that getting government out of the way of the free market would increase economic growth and thus the country's ability to repay these loans. It's important to note here that the United States and Britain were not following their own advice. Until recently, the US and Britain were some of the most heavily protectionist countries. They built their power via government subsidy, erecting trade barriers, restricting patents. Everything they demanded poor countries stopped doing. But poor countries needed this money, so they capitulated with these demands. When it came to Zambia, the greatest concern of the World Bank was easing the mines out of the hands of the government and into the hands of private corporations. And the World Bank made it clear that Zambia would not secure debt relief unless privatization would begin. The sale of the mines were included in almost every single one of the IMF and World Bank credit agreements starting in 1991, and starting in the 90s, mines were sold to international investors.
Hi Tony, so you've just been talking at the FT Commodities Summit. You said the resources sector is entirely about geopolitics. Just talk to us a little bit, unpack that a little bit for us and tell us what you really mean by that.
The first thing is, of course, we have to go where the resources are, not where we might choose to go because it's politically an easy place to operate. The second is that we are invariably working on behalf of governments, extracting their resources for them, selling the resource onto the international markets and paying them royalties and taxes as a consequence of that. So we have a very close relationship with governments wherever we operate, and we forged a very successful partnership in both Zambia and the DRC and created significant benefit for both countries, both in terms of the taxes and royalties we pay, 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 but also the activity that takes place around our mines. If you sit back and look at the impact of Glencore as it develops a mine, the impact of Glencore as it develops a mine, the impact of Glencore as it develops a mine, the impact of Glencore as it develops a mine, the impact of Glencore as it develops a mine in a community, it's very significantly beneficial in improving the quality of life in places like Zambia and the DRC.
Beloved, let's get down to business. Mental self-defense of fitness. Don't rest the show. You got to